What if I told you the world's first travel blogger lived over 2,000 years ago? Before Lonely Planet, before YouTube, before travel influencers, there was Strabo, a Greek geographer who explored the ancient world and documented his journeys in what we might call the first ever travel blog. Born around 63 BC in Amasia, modern-day Turkey, Strabo was a Greek writer, historian, and explorer. He lived at a time when the Roman Empire was expanding across Europe, Asia, and Africa, making travel both exciting and dangerous. But unlike the warriors and traders of his time, Strabo was obsessed with geography. Back then, the world was still a mystery. There were no satellites, no Google Maps, just merchants, sailors, and scholars piecing together information. Strabo set out to document everything he could, combining history, culture, and geography into a 17-book masterpiece called Geographica, the ultimate ancient travel guide. He wasn't just a geographer, he was a storyteller. Strabo didn't just list places, he described landscapes, cultures, and people in vivid detail. He wrote about the bustling streets of Alexandria, the mysteries of the Nile, the harsh deserts of Arabia, and the wonders of Rome, much like a modern travel blogger does today. But Strabo didn't just write from libraries, he traveled. He sailed the Mediterranean, visited Egypt, and walked the roads of the Roman Empire, gathering stories and observations along the way. His journey took him to places that are still famous today: Italy, Greece, Egypt, even as far as India. In this video, we'll follow in Strabo's footsteps, exploring his travels, his discoveries, and why his work still matters today. Strabo was born around 63 BC in Amasia, a city in Pontus, a region in modern-day Turkey. Amasia was dramatically built into the cliffs along the Iris River, with tombs of ancient kings carved into the rock. It was a city of natural defenses and strategic importance. Pontus had once been ruled by Mithridates VI, a fierce enemy of Rome who famously tried to make himself immune to poison. By the time Strabo was born, Pontus had been conquered by Rome, becoming part of the empire. His family likely adapted to the new rulers, securing their aristocratic status under Roman governance. Strabo received a Greek education in Nysa, a city known for its literary and philosophical schools. One of his teachers was Aristodemus, a scholar famous for his expertise in Homeric studies. This deep study of the Iliad and the Odyssey may have influenced Strabo's own writing, which combined geography with narrative storytelling. Around 44 BC, at the age of 19 or 20, Strabo traveled to Rome, the center of the known world, just after Julius Caesar's assassination. Rome was in turmoil, with Octavian, the future Augustus, and Mark Antony fighting for control of the empire. While in Rome, Strabo studied under Tyrrhanion, a Greek scholar from Amisus, another Pontic city. Tyrrhanion had once been a prisoner of war, captured by the Romans, but became a respected scholar. He had access to the vast libraries of Cicero, giving Strabo access to rare historical and geographical texts. Another of Strabo's mentors was Athenodorus Canonites, a Stoic philosopher who had once advised Emperor Augustus. This exposure to Stoic philosophy may explain Strabo's belief that geography was essential for governance. Strabo was not content with learning from books, he traveled extensively across the Mediterranean world. He visited Egypt, Greece, Italy, and parts of Asia, experiencing the landscapes he would later describe in Geographica. In Alexandria, Strabo spent time at the famous Great Library, one of the most important centers of knowledge in antiquity. He studied earlier geographers like Eratosthenes and Hipparchus, comparing their accounts with his own observations. His most significant journey was to Egypt, where he sailed down the Nile and recorded its mysterious annual floods. Strabo explained how the Nile's fertile silt made Egypt the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. He described Egyptian customs, including the worship of sacred crocodiles, which he found both fascinating and bizarre. He also traveled to the fringes of the known world, visiting parts of Arabia and gathering second-hand accounts of India. His descriptions of India were a mix of fact and myth. He correctly noted the cotton trade and vast rivers, but also included legends about giant gold mining ants. Strabo believed geography was not just about maps, but about people, politics, and trade. He understood how mountains and rivers shaped empires, noting how the Alps acted as a natural barrier to Roman expansion. His 17-book masterpiece, Geographica, was an attempt to document the world as it was known in his time. He structured Geographica with a mix of historical accounts, cultural observations, and geographical descriptions. Unlike earlier geographers, Strabo focused not only on physical geography but also on how different cultures lived and interacted. For example, he admired Rome's efficiency but was unimpressed by Britain, dismissing it as a cold and unimportant island. While he respected Greek culture, he acknowledged that Rome's political and military organization had surpassed Greece. Strabo dismissed the idea of lands beyond the Atlantic, believing that the ocean stretched endlessly beyond Europe and Africa. Ironically, this was one of his biggest mistakes, as he rejected the possibility of unknown continents. His work was not widely read in antiquity, but later influenced Byzantine scholars and Renaissance explorers. Despite his errors, Strabo's work remains one of the most important geographical texts from the ancient world. His writings offer a unique snapshot of the ancient Mediterranean, capturing the world at a time of Roman expansion. Strabo was not just a geographer, he was a storyteller, historian, and the ancient world's first travel blogger, documenting his journeys for future generations. Strabo's Geographica was not a dry list of locations but a vivid, detailed, and sometimes opinionated account of the world as he saw it. Unlike earlier Greek geographers, who were primarily concerned with mathematical geography and mapping, Strabo was more interested in people, cultures, and places. His work reads more like a travel guide than a scientific text. He wrote in an engaging style, describing landscapes, cities, and customs much like a modern travel writer. He even included personal observations, critiques, and cultural comparisons. Strabo's work can be seen as an ancient travel blog, where he documented places he had visited and compiled second-hand accounts of regions he had not seen himself. He took great care to verify the sources of his information, criticizing earlier geographers like Eratosthenes and Herodotus for inaccuracies and exaggerations. However, he wasn't always free of bias himself. He frequently dismissed the accounts of sailors and merchants, assuming that educated scholars like himself were more reliable. One of Strabo's most vivid descriptions is of Alexandria, the intellectual hub of the Mediterranean. He describes the great library, the bustling streets, and the city's cosmopolitan mix of cultures. He was fascinated by the city's famous Pharos lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and marveled at how it guided ships safely into port. Like a modern travel blogger, Strabo included practical details about cities, including their economy, climate, and infrastructure. He praised Rome's road network, calling it one of the most impressive feats of engineering, noting how it connected distant parts of the empire and facilitated trade and communication. He also admired Rome's urban planning, writing about its aqueducts, public buildings, and bustling marketplaces, making it clear that he saw Rome as the center of the world. In contrast, he was less impressed with Britain, dismissing it as a cold and unimportant island with little economic value. He saw Ireland as even worse, claiming that the people there were barbaric and ate their dead, an obvious exaggeration but a sign of how little the Romans knew about the region. Strabo's description of India is a mix of accurate trade observations and wild myths. He correctly noted the fertility of the land, the importance of the Ganges, and India's famous cotton production. However, he also repeated fantastical tales of gold-digging ants and people with ears so large they could use them as blankets, stories likely picked up from travelers embellishing their accounts. Strabo's inclusion of fantastical such tales reflects both the limitations of ancient geographical knowledge and the cultural fascination with the exotic and unknown. The gold-digging ant story likely originated from Herodotus' Histories, 5th century BCE, where he describes giant ants in India that dig up gold dust. Strabo, referencing earlier accounts, repeats the tale but expresses skepticism. Some scholars suggest these ants could refer to marmots or other burrowing animals in the Himalayas, whose digging might uncover gold-bearing soil. The story may symbolize the remoteness and perceived strangeness of India, a land rich in wonders and wealth to the ancient Greeks. Traders or explorers returning from India might have exaggerated tales to enhance their own reputations or to explain the mysterious origins of Indian gold. Such tales as tribes with large ears often arose from misunderstandings of foreign customs. For example, some African tribes wore elongated ear ornaments or practiced earlobe stretching, which travelers might have distorted into fantastical descriptions. Oversized ears could symbolize otherness or serve as metaphors for perceived barbarism or exoticism in distant lands. Greek writers like Ctesias and Megasthenes also described monstrous races, e.g., cynocephali or dog-headed people, blending observation with myth to emphasize the edges of the known world. Strabo often critiques implausible stories, calling them mythical, but includes them to document what was reported by others. He states, "It is not the geographer's duty to scrutinize the truth of such things, but to report what has been said by credible witnesses." He depended on earlier writers, e.g., Herodotus, Megasthenes, and travelers' accounts, which were prone to exaggeration. Many tales reinforced Greek and Roman stereotypes about the edges of the earth, where the laws of nature and civilization supposedly broke down. He wrote about reports of men with no mouths, who supposedly survived by inhaling the scent of flowers, perhaps inspired by Hindu ascetics who fasted for long periods. He described Arabia as a land of wealth and trade, noting its frankincense, myrrh, and exotic goods, but also portrayed it as harsh and inhospitable, reflecting common Roman attitudes toward desert cultures. His description of Ethiopia and sub-Saharan Africa is surprisingly detailed. He correctly noted the intense heat, the darker complexion of its people, and the rich natural resources, although his account still included mythical elements, such as legendary long-lived tribes. One of his most famous descriptions is of Greece, where he wrote nostalgically about the glory of its past while acknowledging that Rome had now surpassed it in power. He described Athens, Corinth, and Sparta, reflecting on their histories, philosophies, and architecture, showing a deep respect for Greek civilization. Like a modern travel writer comparing different cultures, he often weighed the strengths and weaknesses of various peoples and governments, seeing Rome's organization and discipline as superior to the more idealistic but fragmented Greek city-states. Strabo was also interested in natural wonders and geological phenomena. He wrote about volcanoes, earthquakes, and strange natural formations. His description of Mount Vesuvius is particularly interesting, as he noted its fertile soil but did not seem to realize it was an active volcano, a tragic oversight given that Pompeii and Herculaneum would be destroyed by its eruption just a few decades later. He described the mysterious Nile flood, which had puzzled ancient scholars for centuries, attempting to provide a rational explanation based on his observations. He also commented on climate differences, noting how the sun was directly overhead in some regions, leading to extreme heat, while other areas suffered from harsh winters and long nights. His accounts included stories of unusual animals, from elephants in India to strange birds in Arabia, always trying to determine which reports were factual and which were exaggerated. Strabo frequently inserted personal opinions and criticisms into his descriptions, making his writing feel more like an ancient travel diary than a traditional academic work. He criticized Herodotus for repeating sensationalist stories, arguing that geography should be based on careful observation and logical reasoning. However, Strabo himself was guilty of dismissing reports that later turned out to be true, such as the possibility of lands beyond the Atlantic. He firmly believed that geography was crucial for governance and military strategy, and his work was aimed at statesmen and rulers rather than the general public. His emphasis on political geography made his work useful to Roman generals and administrators, many of whom used his descriptions for planning military campaigns and trade routes. Though he sometimes repeated myths and incorrect theories, his approach was far more systematic and analytical than many of his predecessors. Strabo's Geographica was one of the first attempts at a comprehensive world description, covering Europe, Asia, and Africa in a single work. His writing style, full of descriptive passages, cultural insights, and strong opinions, makes him feel like an ancient travel writer, capturing the wonders and oddities of the world as he saw them. Strabo's Geographica was a journey through the ancient world, filled with strange tales, exotic cultures, and baffling natural phenomena. His travels took him from the heart of the Roman Empire to the edges of the known world, covering Spain to India, the Nile to the Caspian Sea. He visited flourishing cities, legendary ruins, and remote lands, recording their landscapes, trade, and myths, sometimes with astonishing accuracy, other times repeating wild fantasies. Greece was still seen as the cultural and intellectual heart of civilization, even though it was now ruled by Rome. Strabo visited Athens, where he admired its philosophers, historic temples, and grand theatres, including the Theatre of Dionysus, which could seat thousands. However, he wasn't entirely impressed with the Greeks of his time, writing that they had lost their old discipline and were now more interested in luxury than philosophy. He described Delphi, home of the Oracle of Apollo, where priests delivered cryptic prophecies in a trance, supposedly induced by vapors rising from a fissure in the earth. He recorded the ancient belief that Greece was once home to mythical tribes, such as the Pygmies, a race of tiny people said to have battled cranes in endless wars. In Corinth, he noted the city's wealth and thriving trade networks, controlling commerce between mainland Greece and the Peloponnesus. He described Sparta, though by his time, it was a shadow of its former self, its military traditions fading into history. Strabo marveled at Rome's engineering, particularly its roads, aqueducts, and public baths, which he called the best in the world. He recognized the importance of the Via Appia, which connected Rome to its vast empire. But he also warned that Rome was built on dangerous land, surrounded by earthquake zones and volcanic activity. He described Mount Vesuvius, correctly observing that its soil was highly fertile, but he failed to realize it was an active volcano, a tragic oversight given its future destruction of Pompeii and Herculaneum. In Sicily, he recounted tales of Cyclopes, saying that the island's large caves were once believed to be the homes of these one-eyed giants. He wrote about Mount Etna, describing flames that seemed to reach the sky, a sight that surely both fascinated and terrified ancient travelers. Egypt fascinated Strabo, and his descriptions of the Nile and its cities remain some of his most detailed accounts. He wrote about Alexandria, calling it one of the greatest cities in the world, home to the Great Library, the colossal Pharos Lighthouse, and a diverse population. He was determined to understand the Nile's mysterious floods, offering an early attempt to explain the river's seasonal rise scientifically. In Thebes, he described the colossi of Memnon, two massive statues that reportedly sang at dawn, making a sound like metal striking stone, possibly caused by temperature changes in the rock. He documented strange Egyptian religious practices, including the worship of sacred animals like ibises, cats, and even jeweled crocodiles kept in temple pools. He found it bizarre that some Egyptian priests shaved their entire bodies, including eyebrows and eyelashes, to maintain ritual purity. He visited the Temple of Ammon in the Libyan desert, where priests claimed to hear divine voices in the wind, an eerie parallel to the oracle at Delphi. He recognized Egypt's importance as Rome's breadbasket, noting that its fertile lands and massive grain shipments were vital to feeding the empire. As a native of Pontus, Strabo had an intimate knowledge of Asia Minor, where history and legend mixed freely. He wrote about the Amazons, the legendary tribe of warrior women said to have lived near the Black Sea, even claiming their descendants still existed in remote mountain regions. He visited Troy, comparing Homer's descriptions to real geography, though he admitted that many details from the Iliad seemed exaggerated. He described Cappadocia's strange rock formations, later used for underground cities and hidden Christian monasteries. He noted the rugged mountains and strategic position of Anatolia, connecting Europe and Asia. He recognized Arabia's wealth in frankincense and myrrh, crucial for ancient religious ceremonies and perfumes. But he also described Arabia's extreme heat and vast, waterless deserts, seeing it as a harsh and challenging land. Some reports claimed that giant serpents guarded Arabian caves filled with treasure, a theme that later appeared in medieval and Arabian folklore. Strabo had little first-hand information about Britain, as it was still a relatively unexplored region for most Romans. His descriptions of Britain and the Celtic lands were based on Roman military reports and second-hand accounts from traders. He was not particularly impressed with Britain, dismissing it as a cold, foggy, and economically insignificant island. He wrote that Britain was only valuable for its tin resources but otherwise had little to offer the civilized world. He described the Britons as uncivilized, noting that some of them painted their bodies blue, an early reference to the Picts and their woad tattoos. He recorded that the Britons and Gauls lived in simple wooden huts rather than large stone cities, which he saw as a sign of their primitive nature. His account of Ireland, Hibernia, was even more fantastical, repeating Roman claims that the inhabitants were savages who ate their dead, likely an exaggerated misinterpretation of ritual practices. He also mentioned that Celtic Druids practiced human sacrifice, though he had no direct evidence, relying on Roman sources that sought to justify conquest. Strabo recognized Gaul, modern-day France, as an important Roman province, but he viewed the Gauls as inferior to both Romans and Greeks, believing they had only recently become civilized. He noted that the Romans had transformed Gaul's infrastructure, building roads, aqueducts, and cities that made it part of the wider Mediterranean world. While he acknowledged the Celts' bravery in battle, he considered their culture backward compared to the Mediterranean world. His dismissive view of Britain and the Celtic lands reflected the Roman belief that true civilization was found in Rome, Greece, and the East, not in the cold and distant north. Strabo believed that the Atlantic marked the absolute boundary of the known world, rejecting stories of lands beyond the ocean. He described the Pillars of Hercules, modern-day Gibraltar, as the gateway to the vast and empty ocean, an idea that later inspired speculation about undiscovered continents. He was skeptical of reports about strange islands beyond Spain, though later explorers would prove him wrong. Strabo's Geographica was an attempt to capture the world as it existed in his time. His descriptions allow us to visualize the ancient world, showing us cities and landscapes that have changed beyond recognition. Some of his accounts remain shockingly accurate, while others remind us of how much was still unknown in antiquity. Though he made mistakes, his work remains one of the most comprehensive geographical studies of the ancient world, influencing scholars for centuries. Strabo was not just a geographer, he was an ancient travel writer, documenting the wonders, myths, and mysteries of the world as he knew it. Strabo's Geographica was a monument to the ancient world. His work compiled centuries of knowledge, combining the accounts of Greek scholars, Roman generals, traders, and his own observations into one comprehensive study. Unlike earlier geographers, who focused on mathematical calculations, Strabo was interested in how geography shaped politics, trade, and culture. His detailed descriptions of rivers, mountains, and cities were invaluable to Roman administrators, military strategists, and merchants who needed to navigate the vast empire. Despite its importance, Geographica was not widely read in antiquity. It was seen as a scholarly text rather than a popular work. The original scrolls of Geographica have been lost, but copies and excerpts survived through Byzantine scholars and Islamic geographers during the Middle Ages. The Byzantine Empire preserved sections of Strabo's work, particularly his descriptions of Europe and Asia Minor, which were still relevant to later rulers. During the Islamic Golden Age, Arab scholars studied and copied parts of Geographica, integrating Strabo's knowledge into their own geographical treatises. In the 15th century, Renaissance scholars rediscovered Strabo's writings, recognizing them as a crucial link to the ancient world's understanding of geography. The first printed editions of Geographica appeared in the early 16th century, influencing European explorers and cartographers. Strabo's work directly influenced later scholars and explorers, shaping their understanding of the world. Christopher Columbus and other early navigators studied ancient geographical texts, including Strabo's Geographica, though they ultimately proved many of his theories wrong. Gerardus Mercator, the 16th century cartographer famous for creating the Mercator projection, used Strabo's descriptions as reference points when compiling early maps. Even in modern geography, Strabo's focus on cultural landscapes, trade routes, and human interactions with geography remains relevant. Strabo was often compared to earlier Greek geographers, particularly Eratosthenes and Herodotus. Eratosthenes, 3rd century BC, attempted to calculate the Earth's circumference and focused on mathematical geography, whereas Strabo was more concerned with practical geography. Herodotus, 5th century BC, was known for his storytelling approach, but his descriptions were often filled with myths and exaggerations, which Strabo criticized. Unlike Claudius Ptolemy, 2nd century AD, who created detailed mathematical maps, Strabo's work was less about precision and more about cultural and political geography. Although much of what Strabo wrote has been corrected or expanded by modern geography, his approach to understanding places through their cultures, histories, and economies is still valuable. Modern geography is no longer just about maps and measurements, it also looks at how geography affects human societies, something Strabo was doing 2,000 years ago. His descriptions of ancient trade routes are still studied by historians trying to reconstruct economic networks in the Roman world. His observations about climate, terrain, and natural disasters foreshadow modern fields like environmental geography and historical climatology. Strabo's habit of weighing sources critically, questioning unreliable reports, and comparing accounts makes him one of the first true investigative geographers. Strabo was an ancient travel writer, documenting a world that was rapidly changing under Roman rule. His writings captured a snapshot of the Mediterranean and beyond, preserving details about lands, cultures, and peoples that might have been lost. Many of the cities and landscapes he described still exist today, allowing us to compare his accounts to modern locations. Strabo's blend of personal travel, historical research, and cultural analysis is what makes him feel surprisingly modern. If he lived today, Strabo would be a documentary filmmaker, a historian, and a global travel writer all in one. Strabo's Geographica is a time capsule of the world as it was 2,000 years ago. His work gives us an unparalleled look at ancient cities, landscapes, and cultures, many of which have changed beyond recognition or disappeared entirely. He documented the rise of Rome, the fading of Greek dominance, and the far reaches of the known world, blending geography with history, politics, and myth. His travel writing style, detailed observations, and critiques of earlier sources make him not just a geographer, but an early investigative journalist and travel blogger. Even though we now have satellite maps, GPS, and global travel guides, Strabo's approach to understanding places through their people, cultures, and economies remains relevant. His descriptions of trade routes, climate, and geography influencing political power are ideas still explored in modern geography, history, and international relations. His skepticism toward unverified reports and insistence on cross-referencing sources set the groundwork for modern research methods. His curiosity about the world, the desire to explore, document, and share knowledge is the same spirit that drives travel bloggers, documentarians, and historians today. Imagine if Strabo had access to today's technology and information, what would he think of Google Maps, modern transportation, and the ability to see the entire world in real time? Would he have changed his mind about Britain being unimportant if he could see modern London? Would he have believed in lands beyond the Atlantic if he had been able to cross the ocean himself? Though he was wrong about many things, his fundamental approach, seeking to understand the world through exploration and research, is still a model we follow today. Strabo's Geographica is one of the greatest works of the ancient world, a bridge between history, geography, and travel writing. He documented a world on the verge of transformation, just as Rome was reaching its peak and the Mediterranean was becoming more interconnected than ever before. He captured the ancient world in motion, and thanks to his work, we can still explore it today. Strabo's legacy reminds us that curiosity, travel, and storytelling have been part of human nature for millennia. And in that sense, maybe Strabo really was the first travel blogger. If you enjoyed this journey through Strabo's world, make sure to like, subscribe, and share to keep exploring history with us. And if you want to dive deeper into ancient geography, check out the links in the description for further reading. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next adventure through history.